All right. Welcome back, everyone. This is round two. If anybody actually shows up again, that would be amazing. So happy that some of you guys came in last night. So tonight we'll finish the second half, or a little bit less than second half, of the UAP report. And then I have some commentary, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. So please stay till the end. Share your thoughts and your comments if you have read this report or anything that you pick up from today. I'd really like to hear what you have to say, because I really think that this is a pivotal time in ufology and how we comport ourselves, how we analyze and speak in terms of the phenomena in the public sphere. So yeah, there's a lot to be upset about, absolutely, but there is a lot to be excited about, and there's also a way of helping to keep the narrative of UFO enthusiasm and the possibility of extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence life going without crossing lines. So, without further ado, let's go ahead. Hey, Angel, yeah, you're back. That's so great. All right, Texas, right on, right on. Yeah, so let's go ahead. We left off at page 24 last time, and now we'll pick up on page 25. Okay, so I'll read the last bit of 24 and moving into 25. Actually, I'm going to start right on 25. The UAP Independent Study Team, UAPIST, June 2020, 2nd November to September 2023. Background. NASA established the UAPIST as a subordinate group of its Earth Science Advisory Committee, which was established in accordance with the Federal Advisory Committee Act. The UAPIST examined UAP from a scientific perspective, focusing on how NASA can use data and the scientific tools to achieve a better understanding of UAP. The Assistant Deputy Associate Administrator for Research at NASA's Science Mission Directorate was responsible for orchestrating the study. The independent study team was chaired by the president of the Simons Foundation and included members from the United States government, academia, and the private sector. Results. NASA released its report in September 2023. The report focused on discovering the best data streams available and discoverable to resolve UAP cases. It did not focus on whether or not UAP were of extraterrestrial origin. NASA also established a UAP research director position. All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, established July 15, 2022. Background. In response to the NDAA for fiscal year 22, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the DNI, conveyed direction to the USDINS by renaming the AIMSOG, or AOIMSG, as AARO, and expanded its scope and mission. AARO organized itself around four functions: analysis, operations, science and technology, S&T, and strategic communications. AARO is developing IC and S&T analytic tradecraft practices, intelligence community, implementing a science testing plan, implementing a secure interviewee debriefing program, and is working to standardize UAP collection and reporting across the DoD and the IC. Results. Consistent with congressional direction, AARO provides quarterly reports, semi-annual findings, and an annual report to discuss in coordination with the Office ODNI. In addition, on January 12, 2023, the ODNI submitted the 2020 annual report on unidentified aerial phenomena to Congress. This report was drafted in partnership with AARO and based on AARO's data. The report stated that there was a total of 510 UAP reports as of August 30th, 2022. This included 144 UAP reports covered during the 17 years of reporting, included in the ODNI's preliminary assessment, as well as 247 new reports and 119 reports that subsequently were discovered or reported. The report also stated that UAP events continued to occur in restricted or sensitive airspace, highlighting possible concerns for safety of flight or adversary collection activity. Next page. The AARO director reported to Congress, and the majority of cases in AARO's holdings have ordinary explanation, and that AARO has not seen any evidence that any of these cases represent extraterrestrial technology. Of all the reports that AARO investigated and analyzed, none represent extraterrestrial or off-world technology. A small percentage of cases have potentially anomalous characteristics or concerning characteristics. AARO has kept Congress fully and currently informed of its findings. AARO's research continues on these cases. And for everyone out there, if you don't see the screen, that last paragraph was bold. Foreign and academic investigatory efforts. AARO reviewed 7 other UAP investigatory panels and programs sponsored by a U.S. university, the United Kingdom, Canada, and France. Of these efforts, one official report from a Canadian government effort in the early 1950s claimed UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin, and the program director claimed he was in contact with aliens. This position appeared to reflect the opinions of the director of the effort and was not endorsed or supported by the Canadian government. Stanford University's Sturrock panel, 1998, found no convincing evidence for the extraterrestrial origin of UFO UAP. The United Kingdom's Flying Saucer Party, 1950 to 1951, concluded that flying saucers did not exist. Canada's Sky Project, 2023, is currently ongoing, and the program will release its findings in 2024. Canada's Project Second Story, 1952 to 1954, an advisory committee that advised the government, never reached any significant conclusions. Canada's Project Magnet, 1950 to 1954, was run by Department of Transport engineer Wilbert B. Smith. Smith assessed that UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin and that they flew by magnetism. Smith believed he was in personal contact with extraterrestrial beings through telepathy and, quote, tensor beams. Smith is, in an interview as early as 1961, claimed that in 1952, the United States Air Force lent him a piece of a UFO to study. He also claimed it was composed of magnesium orthosilate. Orthosilicate. I'm not sure. Orthosilicate. The Canadian government closed the project, saying that there were no definitive results from the research. Smith admitted that his beliefs concerning UFOs were his alone and not the government's official position. Just a quick side note here. I made a note on my paper to look up what magnesium orthosilicate. There we go. Ooh, orthosilicate is. If anybody knows what that is, that'd be awesome. Okay. The French government sponsored 3 comprehensive investigatory programs. Groupe d'études et d'information sur les phénomènes. I'm butchering this French, please forgive me. Aerospatial non-identifies. I'm really butchering this, please forgive me. GEPAN 1977 to 1987. Service d'expertise des phénomènes des rentrées. Atmospherique. Oh my God, please forgive me. SEPRA 1988 to 2004, and a new version called Groupe d'études et d'informations sur les phénomènes aérospatiaux non-identifies GEPAN, GEIPAN, that stood up in 2005. When it dissolved, SERPA concluded that the vast majority of the cases possess ordinary explanations, while 28% of its caseload remained unresolved. None of these organizations have found evidence of extraterrestrial visitations to Earth. Whew, I was sweating during those pronunciations. I usually take pride in pronouncing things properly. So again, forgive me. Okay. Key findings. None of these investigations, including USG, foreign, and US academic efforts, reached the conclusion that any of the UAP reports indicated extraterrestrial origin. All of these efforts and reviews concluded that the vast majority of UAP reports could be resolved as any number of ordinary objects, natural phenomena, optical illusions, or misidentifications. Many of the cases, however, remain unresolved. The lack of actionable, researchable data, specifically the lack of speed, altitude, and size of reported UAP, combined with resource constraints, high volumes of cases, and perceived different levels of support from the United States government officials, were factors in all investigative efforts. Even with the significant advancements in ground and air based sensors, the apparent inability to collect sufficient and high quality data for scientific analysis continues to plague investigations. Three efforts investigated reports of direct or indirect physical evidence of UFOs, from depressions on the ground to metallic debris, and found nothing of foreign or extraterrestrial origin. There was at least one USG proposal by the CIA sponsored Robertson panel to engage in an active, quote, training and, quote, debunking effort using various public media tools to steer the public away from reporting UFOs. The proposal reasoned that it did not believe UFOs were foreign technological threats or of extraterrestrial origin. Rather, it viewed the persistent flood of reports as cluttering and bogging down government processes, expressing the concern that such reports could create mass hysteria to the benefit of the Soviet Union. At various points in history, individuals inside and out of the USG, including Dr. J. Allen Hynek, claimed the United States Air Force had a key goal of debunking or explaining away reports of UAP. AARO found no evidence to suggest that the USAF had a policy intended to cover up the evidence of extraterrestrial knowledge, material, or interactions. Rather, the United States Air Force instead sought to focus on what it determined to be more important concerns, such as Soviet technology and US defense readiness. Similarly, at least the first iteration of Project Grudge sought to resolve all cases and prohibited its staff from characterizing reports as unknown or unidentified. Arrow notes that there was possibly one unofficial estimate stating otherwise. Project Sign staff allegedly drafted and signed a report that was circulated for review and approval. It was titled The Estimate of the Situation and assessed that at least some UFOs were of, quote, interplanetary origin. The DoD leadership rejected this report on the basis that it lacked any proof, and it was never published. The first director of Project Blue Book, Captain Edward Ruppelt, said that all but a couple copies of this estimate were destroyed. Arrow has been unable to verify his claim or locate the document. Section 5, Assessment of Interviewee Claims of USG Involvement in Hidden UAP Programs. Okay, summary. As of September 17th, 2023, AARO interviewed approximately 30 individuals. AARO categorized these individuals into three tiers. Tier 1 interviewees are those who have spoken with congressional staff or members of Congress and have been subsequently referred to AARO. Tier 2 interviewees are those who have been referred to AARO by Tier 1 interviewees, and Tier 3 interviewees are AARO-generated interviewees that have a corroborating touch point to the principal integrated narrative of reports from Tier 1 and Tier 2 interviewees. Priority is given to those interviewees who claimed firsthand knowledge of government programs, events, or details about any resulting material. Interviewees relaying second or third hand knowledge are lower in priority, but AARO has and will continue to schedule interviews with them nonetheless. AARO generated random numbers and assigned one to each interviewee. AARO maintains the key, which is stored and handled in a secure manner to protect each interviewee's privacy. In some instances, AARO assigned a random number to a person who was not interviewed with AARO but was referenced by interviewees as a key individual. AARO also assigned numbers to organizations mentioned by interviewees. AARO assesses that two main narratives have emerged, with various and potentially unrelated offshoots. Primary narrative. The primary narrative alleges that the USG and industry partners are in possession of and are testing off world technology that has been concealed from congressional oversight and the world since approximately 1964 and possibly 1947, if the Roswell events are included. The narrative asserts that the UAP program possesses as many as 12 extraterrestrial spacecraft. An AARO interviewee claimed in a third hand account that an organization was in possession of 12 spacecraft recovered from different crash events prior to 1970. Some of the craft allegedly were, quote, intact. The interviewee also stated that the CIA had a partnership with a company that ended in 1989 and wanted all material returned to the CIA. AARO discovered no empirical evidence supporting these claims. An interviewee claimed that an organization was in possession of off world material in 2009 and 2010. A separate interviewee stated that they participated in negotiations to return the material to the United States government. The same interviewee stated that former named senior CIA official squashed the proposal to remove the material from the corporation. A separate interviewee claimed that circa 1999, a former senior US military official told the interviewee that he touched the surface of an extraterrestrial spacecraft. The interviewee stated that the senior officer gave a detailed description of a craft floating in a building. The officer told the interviewee that approximately 150 individuals were working on the program and that the program was kept, quote, outside of government, so the technology could remain proprietary. Two interviewees said they participated in an alleged White House tasked UAP study in Northern Virginia sometime between 2004 and 2007. The study evaluated the impacts to society should the United States, Russia, or China disclose they had evidence of extraterrestrial beings or craft. One interviewee assumed these governments possessed such evidence. The study was conducted by approximately 12 participants who evaluated 64 different aspects of society, such as religion and financial markets, which could be impacted by such a disclosure. The study lasted 1 day, and the interviewee was not aware of any final report or to whom any report may have been delivered. Another interviewee claimed that in the 1990s, he overheard electronic communication of a conversation between two military bases where scientists claimed aliens were present during specialized materials testing. The interviewee also reported that on another occasion in the 1990s, he observed an unidentified flying object at a U.S. military facility. The interviewee described the object as exhibiting a peculiar flight pattern. Just quick side note, what's kind of fun about this is trying to figure out, who's who. So the previous in discussion regarding two interviewees in Northern Virginia study between 2004 2007 reminds me of Hal Puthoff's story. But I thought Hal Puthoff's story of this kind of secret gathering of individuals was late 90s, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, continuing on. An interviewee who is a former U.S. service member said that in 2009, while participating in a humanitarian and security mission in a foreign country, he encountered, quote, U.S. Special Forces loading containers onto a large extraterrestrial spacecraft. A separate interviewee said that a family member was part of an effort to reverse engineer an object assumed to be off world technology in the 1980s. The engineers failed to reverse engineer the object, and it was sent to a different facility for further evaluation. An interviewee pointed out to AARO the existence of an alleged leaked special national intelligence estimate from 1961 as proof of the existence of UAP crashes. AARO obtained a copy of the document through open source research and evaluated its authenticity. Some interviewees and public accounts underpin this storyline by claiming through second and third accounts that some NDAs may have been used to protect a quote reverse engineering program of off-world technology end quote. These accounts describe the NDAs as including quote punishment by death provisions should the signatory disclose information about the program. Some interviewees claimed verbal and written NDAs were administered in several instances. Secondary narrative. The other narrative is that a cluster of UAP sightings that occurred in close proximity to U.S. nuclear facilities have resulted in the malfunctioning and destruction of nuclear missiles and a test reentry vehicle. AARO interviewed 5 former United States Air Force members who served in and around U.S. intercontinental ballistic missile ICBM silos at Malmstrom, Ellsworth, Vandenberg, and Minnow USAF bases between 1966 and 1977. Some of these individuals claim UAP sightings near the silos, while others claim UAP disruptions to ICBM operations. Specifically, they said the ICBM launch control facilities went offline or experienced total power failure. Additionally, one interviewee and a United States Air Force videographer claimed to have observed and recorded a UAP destroying an ICBM loaded with a quote dummy warhead mid-flight. AARO is researching U.S. and adversarial activity related to these events, including any U.S. programs that tested defensive ballistic missile capabilities. Findings. AARO investigated and reached conclusion on the majority of the claims made in these narratives. In most cases, AARO was able to locate the companies, people, and programs that were conveyed to AARO through interviews. AARO will report the results of the unresolved allegations in Volume 2. AARO's findings to date are as follows. No official UAP non-disclosure agreements discovered. In the conduct of this review and to meet the direction of Section 1673 of the NDAA for fiscal year 2023, AARO sent guidance and requests to the Department of Defense, Intelligence Community elements, Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security to review and provide any NDAs pertaining to UAP or its previous names, UFO. To date, AARO personnel have not discovered or been notified of any NDAs that contain information related to UAP, also apart from the standard NDA language contained in Title 18, Section 794, describing the death penalty or jail time for illegally disclosing information relating to the national defense. AARO has not discovered NDAs containing threats to interviewees for disclosing UAP-specific information. Historically, most, if not all, NDAs contain standard language stating that the death penalty can be applied for the crime of disclosing classified information. Title 18, Section 794 is referenced in typical NDAs in several places in relation to the transmission of classified information. Quote, whoever with intent or reason to believe that it is to be used to the injury of the United States or to the advantage of a foreign nation communicates, delivers, or transmits ... information relating to the national defense shall be punished by death or by imprisonment for any other term of years or for life. Former CIA official involvement in movement of alleged material recovered from a UAP crash denied on the record. AARO interviewed and obtained a signed statement from the former CIA official who was specifically named by AARO interviewees. The former official stated that he had no knowledge of any aspect of this allegation. The allegation included the claimed crash of the objects, the possession of the resultant material by the USG and the private sector, and the attempt to transfer material that was purported to be of off-world origin. This reverse engineered program allegedly occurred in the named facility in the 2009-2010 timeframe. Interviewees allege that separate interviewee from the facility attempted to set up a meeting to return material to the USG in 2010, but that the former CIA official stopped the transfer from industry to the USG. The interviewee alleged to have stopped the transfer denied these allegations. The interviewee alleged to have stopped the transfer denied these allegations. The former CIA official stated that he had no knowledge of any extraterrestrial material in the possession of the USG or any other organization. The official signed a memorandum for the record, MFR, attesting to the truthfulness of his statements. In 1961, several national intelligence estimate on UFOs assessed to be not authentic. An interviewee brought to AARO's attention the existence of an alleged Special National Intelligence Estimate, SNIE, dated November 5th, 1961, titled, quote, Critical Aspects of Unidentified Flying Objects and the Nuclear Threat to the Defense of the United States and its Allies, end quote. Through open source research, AARO obtained a copy of the document. After discussions with the CIA's Center for the Study of Intelligence's CSI, the NSA Scientific Studies Board, in parentheses, one of the alleged authors, and research comparing this document to a number of known SNIEs and national intelligence estimates, AARO concluded that the document is not authentic. NSA archives were searched because the NSA Scientific Advisory Board, quote, purportedly was one of the document's authors. CIA, CSI, and NSA did not possess nor have knowledge of the document. AARO found the document lacked IC tradecraft standard, intelligence community standards, and possessed significant inconsistencies with SNIEs and national intelligence estimates of the general time period. These inconsistencies included the document's short length, incorrect formatting, inconsistent branding, lack of a dissemination block, and coordination language, loose narrative style, convoluted logic, imprecise and casual language, and its superficial treatment of globally significant issues. Now, this document that they're referring to, I don't think I'm familiar with, and so I looked it up. I don't see a lot of research on this and a provenance efforts. So it may be just a fake document. It's not impossible. Okay, moving on. Aliens observing material test a likely misunderstanding of an authentic non-UAP program activity. AARO determined this account most likely amounted to a misunderstanding. The conversation likely referred a test and evaluation unit that had a nickname with, quote, alien connotations at the specific installation mentioned. The nature of the test described by the interviewee closely matched the description of a specific materials test conveyed to AARO investigators. 2. Allegation that a former U.S. military service member touched an extraterrestrial spacecraft. An interviewee stated that a former military member who was also an interviewee had stated that he had touched an off-world aircraft. AARO contacted and interviewed the former military member, who denied any knowledge of off-world technology in possession of the USG, a private contractor, or any other foreign or domestic entity. The former military member attested that he could not remember if this encounter with the original interviewee had ever occurred, but opined that if it had happened, the only situation that he might have conveyed was that the time when he touched an F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter at a facility. The former military member signed an MFR attesting to the truthfulness of this account. Okay, real quick aside, because I don't think I included this in my notes later. This, I believe, refers to the earlier report that's mentioned, where one interviewee said that this other person, who turned out to be an interviewee, had given him a detailed account, not a vague account, not a detailed account about a craft that was a UFO and that it hovered. And then here, it seems this other interviewee who they were referring to is saying, no, I don't even remember this conversation. It was probably that one time I touched a Nighthawk stealth fighter. Take that as you will. Okay. The UAP with peculiar characteristics refer to an authentic non-UAP related SAP. AARO was able to correlate this account with an authentic USG program because the interviewee was able to provide a relatively precise relatively precise time and location of the sighting, which they observed exhibiting strange characteristics. At the time of the interviewee said he observed the event, DoD was conducting tests of a platform protected by a SAP, Special Access Program. The seemingly strange characteristics reported by the interviewee match closely with the platform's characteristics, which was being tested at a military facility in the time frame the interviewee was there. This program is not related in any way to the exploitation of off-world technology. Extraterrestrial disclosure study confirmed, not White House sponsored. An authorization in Northern Virginia did not conduct a study between 2004 and 2007 on the social effects should the United States or other world governments disclose they have evidence of extraterrestrial life. Interviewees believed the White House sponsored it. AARO confirmed through two former White House senior officials that the White House did not request it, nor were they aware of any such study. But that doesn't mean the study wasn't done. Aerospace companies denied involvement in recovering extraterrestrial craft. AARO met with high-ranking officials, including executives and chief technology officers of the named companies. All denied the existence of these programs and attested to the truthfulness of their statements on the record. A sample of alleged alien spacecraft is an ordinary terrestrial metal alloy. AARO learned through an interviewee that a private sector organization claimed to have in its possession material from an extraterrestrial craft recovered from a crash at an unknown location from the 1940s or 1950s. The organization claimed that the material had the potential to act as a terahertz frequency waveguide and therefore could exhibit, quote, anti-gravity and, quote, mass reduction properties under the appropriate conditions. The organization that owned the material negotiated an agreement in 2019 with the US Army to analyze the samples. With permission from the stakeholders, AARO acquired this sample to conduct more in-depth analysis. AARO and a leading science laboratory concluded that the material is a metallic alloy, terrestrial in nature, and possibly of United States Air Force origin. Based on its materials characterization, it was also assessed that the material is mostly composed of magnesium, and the bismuth was present was not a pure layer per initial claims. The U.S. Army had also conducted in-house analysis on the sample, and while AARO generally agrees with its conclusions, AARO found that the structure was not purely layered magnesium alloy and bismuth. AARO assesses that a separate private sector organization's recreation of this metallic sample was almost certainly conflated with claims that the aerospace industry was attempting to reverse engineer off-world technology. Prior to AARO's acquisition of the sample, the organization fabricated a replica of the sample to determine if it could be done. The same organization made an attempt to replicate the sample at the same specific location cited by the interviewee as the location where the interviewee alleged to have participated in discussions about transferring UAP crash materials. The claim that extraterrestrial technology was being reverse engineered almost certainly was conflated with this material fabrication. AARO investigating unresolved historical nuclear related UAP cases. Like all historical UAP cases, very little actionable data exists beyond limited firsthand narrative accounts. Nevertheless, AARO continues to investigate these cases due to the sensitive nature of these events, potentially impacting the readiness of the U.S. nuclear program. Although AARO has not been able to recover the alleged film of the ballistic missile reentry being shot down by a UAP in 1964, AARO was able to correlate the general time and location with an anti-ballistic missile test, which could have been the genesis for this observation. All right, section 6. Investigation into named USG sensitive programs. Summary. AARO investigated numerous named and described but unnamed programs alleged to involve UAP exploitation conveyed to AARO through official interviews. Although at least one interviewee claimed to have seen a captured UAP, none of the interviewees had direct access or firsthand knowledge of the programs alleged to be UAP related. One interviewee had access into one authentic program, but his position was such that he had only limited access to its complete details. Interviewees' indirect and incomplete knowledge of authentic efforts most likely contributed to their misinterpretation of what they heard or saw. AARO concludes many of these programs represent authentic current and former sensitive national security programs, but none of these programs have been involved with capturing, recovering, or reverse engineering off-world technology or material. All programs assessed to be authentic were, or if still active, continued to be appropriately reported to either or both the Congressional Defense and Intelligence Committees. Process for protecting sensitive programs while investigating interviewee claims. AARO instituted a secure process for handling information to allow interviewees to come forward to provide their statements to AARO within certain secure facilities. AARO established a partnership with the Special Access Program Control Offices for the DoD, IC, and DHS to review programs identified in interviews by name or description to determine if the programs correlated in time and location to historic SAP or controlled access programs, CAP. This agreement details how interviewee claims concerning the names and descriptions of the alleged programs are handled, stored, and protected so that their veracity can be determined in a secure manner. A key part of this agreement is that AARO investigators have been granted full access to all pertinent sensitive USG programs. Have been granted full access. When industry partners were named, AARO interviewed senior level, appropriately cleared executives, department leads, senior scientists, and engineers. Findings. One private program mistaken for USG program. AARO determined that the following alleged USG program program name was portrayed inaccurately by the interviewee. Virtual Institute for Satellite Integration Training. This program is not a USG funded and supported effort. It was a program operated by a private UAP organization and had a NASA engineer as a participant. NASA verified that it did not sponsor the project. Kona Blue, a proposed UAP recovery and reverse engineering program. Kona Blue was brought to AARO's attention by interviewees who claimed that it was a sensitive DHS compartment to cover up the retrieval and exploitation of, quote, non-human biologics. It's the first non-human or non-human intelligence iteration that we have so far outside of extraterrestrial. Kona Blue traces its origins to the DIA managed OSAP ATIP program, which was funded through a special appropriation and executed by its primary contractor, a private sector organization. DIA canceled the program in 2012 due to lack of merit and the utility of the deliverables. As discussed in Section 4 of this report, while the official purpose of OSAP ATIP was to conduct research into 12 areas of cutting edge science, the contractor team and at least one supportive government program manager also conducted UAP and paranormal research at a property owned by the private sector organization. When DIA canceled this program, its supporters proposed to DHS that they create and fund a new version of OSAP ATIP under a SAP. This proposal, codenamed Kona Blue, would restart UAP investigations, paranormal research, including alleged, quote, human consciousness anomalies, and reverse engineer any recovered off world spacecraft that they hoped to acquire. This proposal gained some initial traction at DHS to the point where Prospective Special Access Program, PSAP, was officially requested to stand up this program, but it was eventually rejected by DHS leadership for lacking merit. As demonstrated by the proposal package and by statements from the originator, Senators Lieberman and Reed asked that the PSAP be established with the promise of additional funding. The proposed Kona Blue lines of effort closely mirrored those conducted by the private sector organization, which is Bigelow's organization, OSAP ATIP. Kona Blue advocates were convinced that the USG was hiding UAP technologies. They believed that creating this program under DHS would allow all the technology and knowledge of these alleged programs to be moved under the Kona Blue program. The program would provide a security and governing structure where it could be monitored properly by congressional oversight committees. This belief was foundational for the Kona Blue proposal, based on the proposal documents and several interviewees who have provided the same information to AARO and Congress. The Oral History Initiative section of the Kona Blue proposal was to collect data. Quote, from an already identified and calibrated list of retired, previously highly placed government armed services, contractor, and intelligence community individuals. The Oral History Project will include gathering all information pertaining to the location of advanced aerospace technology and biological samples, including records, files, reports, photographs, as well as physical samples. It is critical to note that no extraterrestrial craft or bodies were ever collected. This material was only assumed to exist by Kona Blue, advocates, and its anticipated contract performers. This was the same assumption made by those same individuals involved with the OSAP ATIP program. The SAP was never approved or stood up, and no data or material was transferred to DHS. Kona Blue was not reported to Congress at that time because it was never established as a SAP and therefore did not meet the threshold for congressional reporting. However, the Deputy Secretary of Defense provided a congressional notification concerning the program when it was identified in the spirit of transparency. Okay, unnecessary IC program expansion. AARO confirmed the existence of one ICCAP that was unnecessarily expanded in 2021 to include a UAP reverse engineering mission. This program was expanded despite the lack of any evidence or mission need to justify the expansion. The appropriate congressional committees were notified. This program never recovered or reversed and engineered any technology, let alone off-world spacecraft. The CAP was disestablished due to its inactivity, absence of mission need, and lack of merit. Nexus of proponents of the USG UAP reverse engineering allegation. AARO found no empirical evidence that any US UAP investigatory effort since 1945, foreign, domestic, government, private, or academic, has ever uncovered verifiable information regarding the recovery or existence of extraterrestrial beings or crafts. Although AARO continues to conduct interviews, research programs, and pursue investigatory leads, AARO's work has resulted in disproving the majority of these claims using the verifiable information made within these claims. AARO researched and interviewed numerous people, programs, and leads. It has determined that the modern allegations that the USG is hiding off-world technology and beings largely originate from the same group of individuals who have ties to the canceled OSAP ATIP program and a private sector organization's paranormal research efforts. These individuals have worked with each other consistently in various UAP related efforts. Persons 1 to 5 and interviewees 1, 3, 9, 12, 13, and 14 have repeatedly voiced these claims in various public and private venues, and they have petitioned Congress in various capacities on UAP issues. They have not provided any empirical evidence of their claims to AARO. Persons 1 and 3 and interviewees 1, 3, and 12 were involved with the paranormal research conducted under OSAP ATIP. Persons 5 and interviewees 3, 9, and 14 were involved with the alleged crash UAP materials that were provided to the U.S. Army and subsequently to AARO for examination. Persons 4, 7, and 8 and interviewees 1, 3, and 13 investigated UAP on their own and were responsible for successfully expanding the remit of an existing IC program to include UAP exploitation language. AARO notes that persons 1 and 4 never formally sat down with AARO to provide official signed statements. These individuals have been mentioned by other interviewees frequently as sources of their claims. Persons 8 held an informal interview, and interviewee 14 sat for an official interview, but has not signed the memo for the record documenting this interview. Section 7. Historical context of UAP investigatory efforts since 1945. Summary. AARO assesses that the incidence of UAP sightings reported to USG organizations, the claims that some constitute extraterrestrial craft, and the claims that the USG has secured and is experimenting on alien technology most likely are the result of a range of cultural, political, and technological factors. AARO bases this conclusion on the aggregate findings of all USG investigations to date, the misinterpretation of all reported named sensitive programs, the lack of empirical evidence to support the USG reverse engineering narrative, and AARO's assessment that the piece of metal alleged to be recovered from an alien spacecraft in the late 1940s is ordinary, of terrestrial origin, and possesses no exceptional qualities. Although many cases remain unsolved, primarily because of the lack of actionable and researchable data, AARO and its predecessor organizations concluded that the vast majority of cases report on events that amount to ordinary objects, atmospheric and natural phenomena, and observer misidentification. Although many UAP UFO cases remain unsolved, based on the lack of evidence of the extraterrestrial origin of even one UAP report and the assessment that all resolved cases to date have ordinary explanations, AARO assesses sightings and claims of extraterrestrial visitations have been influenced by a range of factors. Commonalities of 20th and 21st century UAP investigations. International security environment and technological surprise. In both periods, changes in the international order brought uncertainty. Concern about the Soviet Union's desire for regional hegemony and military and political superiority contributed to U.S. involvement with conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and elsewhere. Sparked a boom in U.S. technological innovation and led to widespread fear within society about Soviet capabilities and intentions. One primary means of competing with the Soviet Union was to collect intelligence on Soviet leadership intentions and military capabilities. The means by which the US accomplished this goal was to develop a range of air and space based reconnaissance systems to collect an array of intelligence on the Soviet Union, especially over its territory. During some earlier UFO investigation efforts, it was deemed essential to determine if UFOs were Soviet secret weapons or psychological warfare operations aimed at causing public fear and generating hysteria to determine US societal morale. Today's global security environment is similarly dynamic. Both the Russian Federation and the PRC seek to alter the international system at the expense of the security of the United States. AARO recognizes that concern with competitor technological surprise is still a real and legitimate driver of UAP investigations today. That's good. It is imperative to determine whether or not these sightings represent a risk to flight safety and whether these sightings represent technological advances that would pose counterintelligence and national security threats. So, at least in the short run, in the medium run, what we've gotten so far is that Arrow will be around for another couple of years, right? So there's going to be more research done by Arrow and investigations, and of course, the national security threat, which has become the dominating narrative both in the UFO world and in the government, is perpetuating the curiosity and the national security um, need to investigate. Okay. Secrecy. The USG's need to maintain secrecy to protect classified information about intelligence sources and methods, military operations and technology, and US vulnerabilities is also a shared context among all UAP investigations. While secrecy is essential to protect US national security interests, it can reduce the public's trust in government. With a gap in information about UFO UAP investigations, other information sources and narratives, including private UFO investigative organizations and quote ufology, hey, emerged to fill the gap. Arrow assesses that the classification of prior USG investigations have fueled speculation that the government was hiding knowledge of extraterrestrials when, in fact, secrecy was and still is intended to deliberately and thoughtfully protect sensitive military and intelligence community programs, capabilities, sources, and methods. Public interest. Segments of the American public have been interested in this topic since the term flying saucer emerged after Arnold's sighting in 1947. As evidenced by the proliferation of television, books, movies, and podcasts today on the topic, the subject is deeply rooted in the popular culture with its own themes, mythologies, and conspiracy theories. Captain Ruppelt, who was involved with 3 UFO investigations efforts, including being the initial leader of Project Blue Book, noted that there would be spikes in reported sightings after official press events mentioning UFOs, suggesting that reports of sightings can influence the incidence of additional reported sightings. Well, of course. That's like, I mean, just look at the work of Cheryl and Linda Costa. I mean, during the holidays, when we're out in good weather, walking our pets, that's when we're looking up to the stars, right? You just see more because you have more eyes on the skies. Okay, alleged bureaucratic barriers. Alleged bureaucratic barriers, including indifference, cognitive dissonance, lack of support of resources, and deliberate obstruction, are also similarities. Some members of investigatory panels have claimed official obstruction, ranging from lack of access to senior decision makers to insufficient staff and resources, insufficient data and information. Previous and current investigations have been challenged by insufficient data and information for intelligence and scientific analysis to resolve anomalous incidents. Insufficient data and information was compounded by inconsistent reporting and lack of continuity among investigations and investigative practices. Captain Ruppelt, the first director of Project Blue Book, noted that the inability to collect the UFO's altitude, size, and speed was a recurring and significant obstacle to resolving cases. A similar challenge remains today, even with the advancement in technology. Most UAP sightings have no data associated with them beyond an often vague narrative account. And when there is hard data, it is often incomplete or of poor quality. In terms of military reporting, The sensors on which UAP most frequently are captured are calibrated and optimized for combat. UAP are not routinely captured by exquisite, high definition, multi capability intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance collection platforms, a threshold which is often required to successfully resolve a case. Perceived deception. There is a conviction among some Americans that the USG has conducted a deceptive operation to conceal the fact that it has recovered extraterrestrial spacecraft and alien beings, as well as systematically exploited and reverse engineered extraterrestrial technology. This perception probably has been fueled by the key UFO investigators' public comments. For example, J. Allen Hynek of Project Blue Book said that the United States Air Force expected him to perform the role of debunker. And Captain Ruppelt, the first chief of Blue Book, later wrote that he was expected to explain away every report and that the United States Air Force sought to produce press stories in alignment with the USAF's position. Okay. I'd like to see some. I'd like to. I wish we could. I wish Sean Kirkpatrick didn't step down when he did, but because what we really need are like ufologists interviewing him so that we can ask the right questions. Okay. Differences between 20th and 21st century UAP investigations. Decreased public trust. Polling data on public trust reflects Americans' changing views over time. According to the Pew Research Center, polling on this topic began in 1958 when about 75% of Americans trusted the United States government to, quote, do the right thing almost always or most of the time. Since 2007, however, that figure has risen above 30%. This lack of trust probably has contributed to the belief held by some subset of the US population that the US has not been truthful regarding knowledge of extraterrestrial craft. Well, of course, I mean, that certainly fuels the distrust. I think that's perfectly natural. Popular culture. Though there were waves of public interest in UAP and popular culture during the Cold War, especially during the 1950s, AARO assesses that UAP content in popular culture is more pervasive now than ever. The speed of discovery and the ubiquity of information available through the internet on the topic is unprecedented. Frequent exposure to the topic through traditional and social media has increased the number of Americans who believe that UAP are of extraterrestrial origin based on a 2021 Gallup poll. Aside from hoaxes and forgeries, misinterpretation and disinformation is more prevalent and easier to disseminate now than ever, especially with today's advanced photo, video, and computer-generated imagery tools. Internet search and content recommendation algorithms serve to reinforce individuals' preconceptions and confirmation biases just as much as to help educate and inform. I mean, that's totally true. Okay. Section 8, testing and development of U.S. national security and space programs most likely accounted for some portion of UAP sightings. Summary. We assess that the majority of UAP sightings in the earlier decades of UAP investigations were the result of misidentification of ordinary phenomena and objects, based on AARO's finding of its own cases to date and the findings of all past investigatory efforts. However, we assess that some portion of these misidentifications almost certainly were a result of the surge in new technologies that observers would have understandably reported as UFOs. Along with these systems, a broad and varying technology industry emerged, along with a network of highly secretive national laboratories across the United States to support these efforts. AARO's review of Project Blue Book cases show a spike in reported UAP sightings from 1952 to 1957 and another spike in 1960. These reporting spikes most likely are attributed to observers unknowingly having witnessed new technological advancements and testing and reporting them as UFOs. Of course, the below examples represent formally classified and sensitive programs that involved thousands of test flights, rocket launches, and extensive experimentation, which AARO assessed most likely were the cause of many UAP reports. AARO assesses that this common and understandable occurrence, the misidentification of new technologies for UAP. Oh, guys, I left you behind a page. My apologies, YouTube. My apologies. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead. We are now on page 40. Page 40 is on screen. Is present today, such as in cases where rocket exhaust plumes, microsatellite trains, and UAS systems with odd morphologies are reported as UAP. The below examples represent a sample of the unclassified and declassified authentic national security programs that AARO assesses probably were associated with erroneous UAP reporting. Manhattan Project, August 1942. The U.S. effort to build an atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project, was named after the location of its initial offices in what became known as the Manhattan Engineer District at 270 Broadway, Manhattan, New York City. General Leslie R. Groves, head of the project, followed the custom of naming the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers districts after the city in which they were located. The secretaries surrounding the Manhattan Project and the establishment of several other national laboratories, such as Los Alamos National Laboratories, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratories, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and Oak Ridge National Laboratory to support this effort probably contributed to the spike in reported UAP. Okay, V173 XF 5U-1, quote, flying pancake, 1942. The V-173 aircraft flew for the first time on November 23, 1942. It was believed that maintaining a uniform airflow over the wingspan, or quote, pancake fuselage, would allow the aircraft to take off and land at exceptionally low speeds without sacrificing high-speed performance qualities that appealed to the USN for its fighter aircraft. The V-173 could take off vertically, had a circular wing, 23.3 feet in diameter, and could almost hover. The XFFU-1's design was largely similar to the V-173. However, the USN canceled the project in 1948 in favor of a switch to turbojet engines. And of course, those of us in ufology have heard that people confused the Horton wing, for instance, a wooden built aerial aerodynamic built plane, experimental, that never really went anywhere. But the idea that it was shaped oddly, so people just confused it for a UFO. But here's what's really interesting is that a lot of these experimental crafts, they barely got lift and could fly. So those craft in particular are not a good case for a misidentified UFO. And I would imagine anyone who's working on a base, on the ground in visual proximity of one of these craft, had the clearance to be there and probably, didn't misunderstand what was happening. Okay, Project Mogul, 1947 to 1949. The U.S. Army Air Force Air Materiel Command operated Project Mogul between 1947 and 1949. Hold on a second, just want to highlight something. Okay. The aim of this program was to secure intelligence on Soviet nuclear weapons testing and to provide an early warning mechanism for Soviet ballistic missiles. Specifically, Project Mogul scientists work on developing high-altitude balloons that would carry sensors capable of detecting long-range sound waves from weapons tests or missiles traveling through the atmosphere. A crashed balloon associated with Project Mogul outside of Roswell, New Mexico, is assessed to be the source of early UFO claims. Project High Dive, 1950s. Project High Dive was a program that conducted tests on large balloons and used test dummies in its experimentation. The goal of this program was to research the effects on pilots when they ejected from aircraft, especially pilots' tolerance to deceleration from wind drag. Okay, page 41. Project Aquatone / Dragon Lady 1954. President Eisenhower authorized Project Aquatone to develop the U-2 Dragon Lady, a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft to collect intelligence on Soviet nuclear deployments. More than half the UFO reports investigated in the 1950s and 1960s were assessed to be U.S. reconnaissance flights. According to a declassified CIA assessment on reconnaissance aircraft, the report noted that UFO reports would spike when the U-2 was in flight, especially from airline pilots to air traffic control. At the time, commercial flights typically flew below 20,000 feet, while the U-2 flew at 60,000 feet. The report noted that when commercial pilots were flying east to west with the sun below the horizon, the sunlight would illuminate the U-2. Gotcha. Totally understandable. Okay. WS-117L/Corona, late 1956. In 1956, the United States Air Force initiated the WS-117L satellite reconnaissance program, equipped with a film return vehicle. Following the launch of Sputnik, the Eisenhower administration made this program a high priority. In February 1958, President Eisenhower decided the CIA would have the lead role in the program, called Corona, and that it would be jointly managed alongside the United States Air Force. The Corona program performed 140 launches between 1959 and 1972, with many returning film from space to the Earth for recovery. All right. There's the VZ-9AV AARO car / Project Silver Bug. I think they're just trying to get me on tongue twisters. Okay. Uh, Canada initially led an effort to develop a supersonic vertical takeoff and landing fighter bomber in the early 1950s. AARO AARO Aircraft Limited, later AARO Canada, led the design for the concept, and this effort yielded the AARO car, an aircraft with a circular shape that gave it a stereotypical flying saucer appearance. Canada pulled its support when the project became too expensive. The U.S. Army and USAF took over the project in 1958 when AARO offered it to the USG when it became known as Project Silver Bug. Thanks, Canada. AARO built two test vehicles that were designated as the VZ-9AV AARO car, but the project was canceled in December 1961 when the vehicle could not lift more than a few feet off the ground, as I was mentioning earlier. Project Silverbug was declassified in 1997. Explorer 1, January 1958. The United States launched its first satellite, excuse me, Explorer 1, into space on January 31, 1958. Explorer 1 carried a cosmic ray detector and was designed, built, and operated by the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Oxcart A-12 SR-71, 1958. President Eisenhower approved the CIA-led program to develop a successor to the U-2 spy plane in 1958, which became fully operational in 1965. The U-2's successor, the A-12 Oxcart, sustained a speed of Mach 0.3 at 90,000 feet altitude. By the time the A-12 was deployed by the CIA in 1967, Corona satellites were being used to collect imagery of denied areas with less provocation than aircraft overflights. In 1968, President Johnson ordered the retirement of the A-12 when it was replaced by the SR-71, which was itself a modified version of the A-12. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it one of the ox carts that the Russians detected because they were using thermal sensors, and when they had removed the ox cart from the testing grounds, because of the sun in the desert, the shadow created by the ox cart cooled the ground was cooler. So when they thought, okay, it's time to move the ox cart because the satellite may be passing over, it saw them anyway because it saw the shape of the aircraft in the shadow, or thermal created by the shadow. Anyway, okay, moving on. 42. Project Mercury, 1958 to 1963. Project Mercury, America's first human space program, made 6 flights. The objectives of the program were to orbit a manned spacecraft around Earth, investigate humans' ability to function in space, and recover astronauts and spacecraft safely. Tattletale / Grab, September 1960. The United States was the first nation to deliver a reconnaissance satellite to space. This electronic intelligence ELINT satellite was developed by the Naval Research Laboratory in early 1958 under the code name Tattletale, with the mission of intercepting Soviet radar signals. The program later became known as GRAB, Galactic Radiation and Background, after public disclosure of the ELINT satellite project. Project Gemini, 1961 to 1966. The Gemini program was a U.S. human spaceflight program that took place between the Mercury and Apollo programs. Similar to Project Mercury, Project Gemini spacecraft was launched using ballistic missiles that were designed to carry nuclear payloads. Project Gemini conducted 12 missions. Project Apollo, 1961, 1972. Project Apollo was a NASA human spaceflight program conducted after Project Mercury and Project Gemini. Project Apollo totaled 14 missions, 11 spaceflights, and 12 astronauts walking on the moon. Poppy, 1962 to 1977, the successor to GRAB, Poppy was an ELINT satellite system developed by the National Research Laboratory that operated from 1962 to 1977 to collect Soviet radar emissions, and a total of 7 Poppy missions were launched between December 1962 and December 1971. The program was declassified in 2004. Gambit, 1963 to 1971. The National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, launched its first high-resolution photo reconnaissance satellite system in 1963, which became known by its codename Gambit. 2 Gambit systems were developed. Gambit 1 initially launched in 1963, and Gambit 3, which was first launched in 1966. The Gambit 1 satellite's exposed film was returned to Earth in re-entry vehicles, or buckets, that separated from the satellite, fell through the atmosphere, and descended by parachute until obtained by United States Air Force aircraft at about 15,000 feet altitude. Gambit was declassified in 2011. Hexagon, 1971 to 1986, similar to Gambit. Hexagon was an NRO photo reconnaissance satellite system. It was launched in 1971 to conduct wide area searches of denied territory. From 1971 to 1986, 19 missions collected imagery over 877 million square miles of Earth's surface. The Hexagon system was the last satellite employing film reentry vehicles. Hexagon was declassified in 2011. Space Transportation System Space Shuttle, 1972, 2011. The Space Shuttle program was NASA's 4th human spaceflight program and was comprised of the first reusable spacecraft to carry humans into Earth's orbit. The Space Shuttle fleet, Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour, flew 135 missions, serviced the Hubble Space Telescope, and helped construct the International Space Station. The first shuttle launch, Columbia, was conducted on April 12, 1981. Have Blue / F-117A Nighthawk, Tacit Blue, 1975. The Defense Aero Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, oversaw the development of Have Blue in the mid-1970s, which was the first practical combat stealth aircraft. Have Blue completed its first test flight in 1977, and the success of the program led the United States Air Force to later produce F-117A Nighthawk, as well as the Tacit Blue aircraft. The Have Blue, F-117A Nighthawk, and Tacit Blue programs laid the foundations for the later development of the B-2 stealth bomber. Advanced Technology Bomber, B-2 Spirit, 1980. The B-2 is a United States Air Force low observable stealth bomber capable of delivering conventional and nuclear payloads. It uses a combination of reduced infrared, acoustic, and electromagnetic signatures. It was first publicly displayed on November 22nd, 1988 in Palmdale, California, and conducted its first flight on July 17th, 1989. The first aircraft was delivered on December 17, 1993. Strategic Defense Initiative, March 1983. At the initiative of President Ronald Reagan, the Strategic Defense Initiative Organization was established in 1984 to explore a multi-layered strategic defense against ballistic missiles. This program involved research into space-based and ground-based systems, including laser and interceptor missiles. This intensive research effort involved national laboratories and academia. Some of the technologies researched were determined to be years from development, and funding was reduced. The program ended in 1993 and was replaced by the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization. Advent of unmanned aerial vehicles in 1980 to present. The research and development, flight testing, evaluation, deployment, and the operation of drones, unmanned aerial systems, UAS, unmanned aerial vehicles, UAV, remotely piloted aircraft, RPA, and remotely piloted aircraft systems, RPAS, almost certainly resulted in reported sightings of UAP. Some of these systems had a, quote, saucer or triangle-shaped appearance and were capable of loitering aloft. Yep. The USG acquired and operated a number of systems for a range of missions, including intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and strike, among others. The below systems represent a sample of those that have been operationally deployed since 1994 Bosnia conflict and subsequently employed in counterterrorism operations around the world. Since then, their form and use have spread to civil and commercial applications. GNAT 750. The GNAT 750 was developed in the late 1980s by General Atomics Aeronautical Systems, Inc. The prototype served as the basis for a more advanced design under DARPA. It was first used in 1994 during the Bosnian conflict, where satellites were not optimized to collect for extended times over such small areas, and where the airspace was heavily defended by capable anti-aircraft missile systems. Predator. The Predator system, also built in General Atomics Aeronautical Systems, Inc., was based on the GNAT 750. It was initially a joint USN and US Army project, but transitioned to the United States Air Force in 1996. It was known as the RQ-1. The system possessed synthetic aperture radar, optical and infrared sensors. It was used to support United Nations and North Atlantic Treaty Organization efforts in Bosnia and was widely used in counterterrorism operations. It became a platform with a wide array of technical capabilities that performed a variety of missions, such as close air support, combat search and rescue, precision strike, convoy raid, overwatch, target development, and terminal air guidance. The United States Air Force retired the fleet in 2018. Reaper Atomics, I'm sorry, General Atomic Aeronautical Systems, Inc. also built the MQ-9 Reaper as newer, larger version of the MQ-1 Predator UAV. This platform is faster, equipped with more advanced sensors, can carry more munitions than the Predator, and can be easily tailored with a variety of mission-specific capabilities. The system requires a pilot to control the aircraft and an aircrew member to operate the sensors and weapons. It has an operational altitude of 50,000 feet. The aircraft is operated out of a variety of locations worldwide, including Creech Air Force Base, AFB, in Nevada. Dark Star. The RQ-Dark Star was a remote pilot-assisted stealth system intended to conduct a reconnaissance mission in high-threat areas. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and DARPA developed Dark Star in the mid to late 1990s. It never entered production, but the research conducted on Dark Star led to subsequent advances used on other platforms. Some observers asserted that Dark Star resembled a flying saucer with long, narrow wings. It was designed to be fully autonomous from its launch, mission engagement, and return. It used satellite links to transmit sensor data. The first prototype flew in 1996, but crashed a month later on its second flight. The system completed 5 test flights before DoD terminated the program in 1999 to cost and instability problems. Polecat, Lockheed Martin's Advanced Development Program Organization, also known as Skunkworks, developed the P-175 Polecat UAV to better understand the flight dynamics of tailless batwing-shaped 90-foot wingspan high-altitude UAV, including the next generation of structural composite materials and configurations. The Polecat made its first flight in 2005, and Lockheed Martin disclosed its existence in the Farnborough Air Show in 2006. Sentinel. The RQ-170 Sentinel is a UAV developed by Lockheed Martin Skunkworks for the United States Air Force. It is a low observable platform with a variety of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance payloads. The Sentinel is operated out of Creech Air Force Base and the Tonopah Test Range in Nevada. Global Hawk, built by Northrop Grumman, the RQ-Global Hawk is the largest UAS in operation by the USAF. It can fly at 65,000 feet, more than 34 hours, and is also capable of loitering at 60,000 feet while monitoring almost 58,000 square miles. The aircraft is currently fielded in 3 different models. Section 9 already. Conclusion. To date, AARO has not discovered any empirical evidence that any sighting of a UAP represented off-world technology or the existence of a classified program that had not been properly reported to Congress. Investigative efforts determined that most sightings were the result of misidentification of ordinary objects and phenomena. Although many UAP reports remain unsolved, AARO assesses that if additional quality data were available, most of these cases also could be identified and resolved as ordinary objects or phenomena. This report represents volume 1 of AARO's HR2. Volume 2 will be published in accordance with the date established in Section 6802 of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 and will provide additional analysis on information not yet secured and analyzed, interviews not yet conducted, and additional avenues of investigation not yet completed by the date of publication of Volume 1. And that's it. Everything else is footnotes and references. Okay. I don't know if I'm the only person standing right now. Is there anybody else in chat? Anybody listening? Are you ready? Okay. Let's start with some of the notes here. It's funny. I never wear my reading glasses when I'm doing a show, but all that reading, my goodness. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to start from the beginning here. So on page 7, it says, quote, there is no direct correlation between between the amount and quality of available information on a case with the ability to conclusively resolve it. So effectively, and we hear this throughout the report in different manners, the implication here, or blatant statement, is that we have everything that we need, and if you just give us additional data, there'll be no proof of UAP. Well, the first note I took in one of Richard Dolan's books, UFOs in the National Security State, which I made a note of as I'm writing my own book right now, is the Redmond, Oregon event, September 24th, 1959. Now, this also applies to the argument that there's not enough sensor and instrument data. Well, okay, so if they did a deep dive and they had access to all the Project Blue Book files, how do you not come across a case like this? You have police officer visual contact, other ground witnesses. Through visual aid, such as binoculars, you could see a craft. A police officer said, I could see this flat, rounded craft. The FAA reported to Seattle Air Route Control Center the anomaly. Jet fighters were scrambled. People on the ground, visual contact saw this occur. There was gun sight radar used by one of the pilots. Exceptional acceleration was observed. And the object was also observed to hover. The event lasted hours, and then Air Force claimed false radar returns. Citizens learned the Air Force took radiation measurements later on, and then they thought, wait a minute, why did they take radiation measurements if Air Force just said it was false radar returns? And then the Air Force changed its story to weather balloons, which now we're contradicting themselves twice. And then NICAP, and remember, NICAP did have some, in its early years, government officials a part of the program and helping to perpetuate the program. So NICAP obtained somehow FAA records describing the UFO behavior, which now goes in the face of the weather balloon explanation. So there's just one case, right? So we read through this whole report, and over again, we're hearing there aren't cases out there with enough data, but there are. There are. Now what he says later on is hard data. Okay. So what he's saying is I want a radar printout, right? I want, especially in, these days, some kind of data download that I can take and actually work with. But that doesn't negate the conflux of supportive evidence when you have pilots. So in the case of the Tic Tac, you have Alex Dietrich and Dave Fravor making eye visual contact. Their sensors picked up the object, and there was also a radar detection from the ship. So we have a problem. What happened to the data? Well, the data was apparently wiped, right? Because that's alleged what happens. Those black boxes or bricks or whatever they call them captures the data. It's in the system for a little while, and then it gets wiped out, and then it's lost. Now, the claim was that there were Navy officials that had come via helicopter, landed on the Nimitz, requested these data files from the fighter jets, and then left. So what does Sean Fitzpatrick do is he inquires about this. Well, if this is a clandestine operation, would they keep any record of the aircraft landing, exiting? Would any of those apparently unnamed Navy pilots, Navy officers that were collecting this data, put their name on the record anywhere? No, of course not. If this is a clandestine cover-up. So I get it. Like anecdotal, it's a struggle. It really is. But you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, this is not how procedure works. Ergo, it never happened. That's not how cover-ups work, or that's not how secret access programs work when you don't want to be found. So I'm just going to play this little clip that I took from, actually, thanks to Joe Murgia posting this on Twitter. This was a recent interview with Sean Kirkpatrick from the NSSA, National Security Space Association, relating to what I was just speaking to.
I testified multiple times on the fact that Tic Tac, there's some great eyewitness accounts of what is described as the Tic Tac. What was lacking is data, right? So I worked with one of the pilots to try to tease out a little bit more of what exactly was it that we were potentially witnessing, and by the descriptions of everything from water to water disturbance to motion, relative motion, and how you can maybe see what you're seeing. Unfortunately, what's going to happen is, I think that one, my opinion is that one is going to remain unresolved because there is no data. There is no radar data. Allegations of the secret black helicopter that came and picked up the tapes. None of that happened. There's no evidence that somebody pulled the tapes off. What does happen, and this is why we had to change the data retention policy, was all of these platforms have fixed storage or fixed amount of storage, and they only retain the data for any given mission, maybe a day, and unless there is a problem with the platform that they use the data for diagnostics for. And then the next time that platform goes out, the data is overwritten. So there's no conspiracy in that. That's just how the military operates with these data tapes and whatnot. So we did write new policy that said, hey, look, if you're reporting a UAP, you have to save all of that data and transmit it to AARO.
Right. So along with this, Sean Kirkpatrick says multiple times, there's no there. Again, if there's a cover up. Now, if you're a detective and you're investigating a mob, the mafia, you start knocking on doors, and people who are afraid or people who are covering up are going to say, oh, nope, no one's here. I don't know what you're talking about. So what do? You've got to find other ways around it. And what I don't get from this report is that the AARO team, or Sean Kirkpatrick leading it, thought to themselves, let's really be detectives here. We have these people coming to us and telling us there's something going on. Then they interview some witnesses related to that, and those witnesses go, no, I didn't say that. That's no different than if you're investigating the mob. Of course, they're going to say, no, I didn't say that. No, I didn't see that. No, non-disclosure agreements don't exist. A non-disclosure agreement can be a very powerful thing psychologically. So we do know that if you really want to cover up a program, you don't keep files, right? You don't. However, if you're reading someone into a program psychologically, and remember, we're talking, intelligence community level thinking here. You bring a piece of paper to them and you have them read it and you have them sign it. Of course, I'm speculating here, but you would have them read it and sign it. And basically it says, if you reveal information, your life is on the line, right? This is treasonous. It could result in jail time or a penalty of death. That's scary. So you go through that process, you have them sign it, and then you burn it. You don't burn it in front of them, but you get rid of the file. It doesn't exist. It's the psychological impact that is had there. There's a message being sent to that person read in. This is how serious we are. Okay, so if we assume that there is no NDA to be found, because I would imagine those files would be destroyed immediately, then what does Sean Kirkpatrick do? You have to knock harder and start. That's weird. And start a new path of investigation. I'm not going to get into that because he knows so much more as far as names go, and I wouldn't even know where to speculate, where to start. So I'm going to move on with this. Okay, so this is still pretty early on. Alloy of, quote, ET material of magnesium, zinc, and bismuth was terrestrial. This is the conclusion that they came to. Well, isn't that strange? Because the TTSA, which is who he's referring to in this report, that that organization gave them the material, did their own testing. There was testing before that, I think. The testing by the Navy what was done, and so I'm assuming that Kirkpatrick is referring to the test that the Navy actually did when TTSA, loaned this object to the Navy. So why do we have one analysis saying the layering here is so not normal? It's precise. It can only be from a manufactured advanced process. And then they're saying, no, this is pretty mundane. It's terrestrial. Okay, well, if you're going to do that, like you got to bring the data, right? So I'm really, really hoping that in volume 2, that there's the data, because I went through the footnotes and I couldn't find the references. Now, some of those were purposely obfuscated to protect names, and I totally get that. But let's just step back a little bit and see how other people approach this. So, during the Soul Foundation event, Gary Nolan was discussing different material of alleged extraterrestrial craft. So, he brought up the data, the stats, the measurements here and here and here, Council Bluffs, and these are just a few screenshots. This was a really thorough presentation. Why doesn't AARO report include this kind of presentational data? I want to see the receipts. I want to see what you came up with, so that we can compare. Because right now we're just taking their word that there's nothing unusual about this data. I really, if everybody has a chance to go and check out Kevin Knuth's presentation on the Soul Foundation YouTube channel, it's awesome. It's like a ufologist's dream, because he does an excellent job of breaking down the physics and engineering of UFO reports. And one particular presentation that I absolutely loved, he explained how electromagnetic energy could actually cause a car starter to shut off and restart. And what he found, based on his research, was that the impression of this electronic output would cause cars to fail and restart about 10% of the time, the starters. And it just so happened that the number of UFO reports where people reported experiencing the car losing power and restarting on its own was about 10%. That's an impressive correlation. Of course, I didn't do the research myself, so I don't know, how legitimate that data is. But if that's a real correlation, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So, as a friendly reminder to everybody as we move on, and thanks to Dr. Z on DZW on Twitter, I was just looking up Stanton Friedman because his voice pops into my head fairly frequently, and let's just remind ourselves: 1, don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up. 2, what the public doesn't know, I'm not going to tell them. 3, if you can't attack the data, attack the people. And 4, no point in doing investigation for research, do it by proclamation. And, we're flipping the tables here. I think we're getting a lot of proclamation. Again, I know that they're dealing with anecdotal stories. However, that said, that is still evidence. You can't throw it out. Okay, I just want to go to really quick. Okay, so Eric Weinstein posted on Twitter. Many of you are asking for my reaction regarding the just released AARO report. There is much to say. I want to think carefully before saying more. I am not unsympathetic to U.S. national security needs in this. In February of 2023, Joe Rogan invited me for 4 hours onto the world's largest English language program to describe in detail, it's episode 1945, the mystery of potential U.S. government involvement in UFOs and post-Einsteinian physics during the mysterious golden age of general relativity. It has been seen and discussed by millions as expected. I was thus eager to see how thorough this report would be by combing it for search strings raised in my research. And then he posts his search strings. If you look at the number of zeros, what Eric has been saying all along is that if you're going to study this, you really need to bring a team of physicists and mathematicians, aerospace engineers, etc., on board. And especially, he's thinking in terms of physics, because physicists would be the ones that would recognize something truly exotic and try to understand it. So all these recommendations, and it doesn't seem that AARO followed up on any of them except for one. There was one I can't remember what that was. Oh, physics. There was 5 points: 16, 17, and 53. But as you and I know, going through this, 153 is only a footnote, and on pages 16 and 17, it doesn't go to any deep analysis as far as the math and physics go. So his recommendation is, it is simply not possible to treat the current AARO report as historically complete or comprehensive. To gain the public trust, the successor to AARO would have to expand and redo this analysis with input from domain professionals who are trusted by the public not to have an apparent agenda or government background. Okay, e.g., Professor David Kaiser of MIT, or Dr. Nima Arkani Hamed of IAS, Professor Brian Keaton of UCSD, Avi Loeb of Harvard. Okay, otherwise, it is relatively easy for scientists to follow the science in government reports to see what is not being addressed or discussed. What he's saying is that, what's the new science? What might we be looking at here that you're going to go down the wrong road? You're going to prove it false because you're relying on the established science as we understand it. So I swear, it's amazing, the number of voices from intelligent, uh, well-studied, PhD level, brilliant scientific minds we have coming to the fore now. Now, he's clear he's not like a defender of like, hey, it's extraterrestrials or it's not human intelligence. He's just like, there's something here. We really need to look into this. Okay. And then I'm just going to put a little quote on there. There, he said, "I don't have a dogfight in this UFO NHI fight. I do have a dog in the quote, don't gaslight the public by invoking scientists and scientific credentials fight." Man, like, man, that is what we've been saying for so long now. And we're finally getting some leading voices here, and I really, really appreciate that. Okay, so we looked at the arts parts. For those of you who don't know, that would be the odd metallic structure. Interesting thing here, Kona Blue. I wasn't very familiar with Kona Blue, so I guess really nothing came of that. It was another effort by Harry Reid and Lieberman to keep, OSAP ATIP going. I do have to admit here, okay, so doing the paranormal investigations on top of the UAP UFO investigations, when that's not really what was being approved by this budget, that we're losing sight, and it doesn't do well for the credulity of the investigations. Okay, so I understand the criticism there, I really do. On page 10, quote, "None of the UAP reverse engineering programs mentioned by interviewees are UAP reverse engineering programs." So basically, he's saying nothing to see here, folks. And yet, he said, some claims are under evaluation. So again, if you're looking for a UAP program that doesn't want to be found, how do you find it? Guys, it's getting so late, and I have so many more notes. So I think what I'm going to do is do one more continuation another night and offer you more. But I just want to quickly, hey, Kat, how are you? Thanks for stopping in. Alien Love, hey, David. I just want to see if anybody has any questions or comments before I go. Yeah, I would have liked to have heard the cases they couldn't disprove. Jing, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And this is what this thing was really light on. Where were the receipts? Where was the data? Again, could volume 2 have that? Maybe. Hey, Andy stopped in. That's awesome. Hey, Andy. Cat Brooks 12 graft. I know. I know. I honestly, there really is something about the the, the circular argument and the game of telephone that occurs. So there's kind of a feedback loop. So there are a group of prominent actors in this that are talking amongst each other, right? So you've got like Eric Davis, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, Corbell, and all these people that are really pushing. David Grush, you can argue, and then you have the little bit more outside. You have like Leslie Keene that work together with these people to bring the story out. Is there an echo chamber? Um, maybe, maybe, but if you think about David Grush's testimony, and again, this is another thing that upsets me about this report, is David's like, there was 40 people. I interviewed 40 people. It wasn't just this group of, anywhere from 6 to 10 people at best, where there could be some sort of echo chamber. There's so many more other people that were clearly outside of that circle that were offering information. So hopefully we'll find out at least some of these people later and get more evidence. But in the meantime, that's it. That was a long one. Thanks guys for hanging out. I'm going to have to continue the rest of my data feedback and commentary on this report. Until next time, peace and love, and thanks so much for hanging out on this extra special presentation of Coffee and UFOs. Okay, now I'm going to find my exit video because there we go. All right. Peace and love, guys. Thanks for hanging out.